It's actually to ensure that our schools are as inclusive and respectful and safe as they can possibly be.
He can keep his 30 pieces of silver. We will not yield to blackmail from the President of the United States.
White House spokesman Josh Earnest explaining the administration directive on transgender bathrooms, but pushback from Texas Lieutenant Governor Dan Patrick about the order and the threat that federal funds will be cut off to school districts that resist. And we're back now with a panel. Well, George, the Obama administration is basically acting on its own on this issue. There's been no consultation with Congress, and Congress has done no legislating on the issue of transgender rights. On the other hand, last month was a ruling by the Fourth Circuit Court of Appeals that held that Title IX basically protects transgender rights on the issue of bathrooms and other matters of their choice. What's your take on all this?
Well, first of all, they do this with a guidance letter, which is supposed to be not mandatory, but that's their way of getting around the Administrative Procedures Act that requires public hearings and public comment. 3 lessons here. The governor says they can keep their 30 pieces of silver. Most at this late stage in the game, public schools, every institution in America is so tied in with federal money that as soon as they take the pieces of silver, they become appendages of the federal government and subject to this kind of unilateral executive edict. Second, this is bound to be a stimulus, and this is the good side of it, to the growth of private education in this country. People say we really don't want to be in public schools if they are manipulated this way. But third, the most important thing about this is the manipulation of language. George Orwell's 1984 novel was a genius because it said, the government controls language, it has ultimate control. The '64 Civil Rights Act bans discrimination on the basis of sex. The administration is saying sex is a synonym for gender identity. Not true. The party of science ought to know that sex is a matter of chromosomes. And those advocating for transgender rights have been saying for years that indeed it is a matter of sexual gender identity that is not the same as sex. So what is sinister here is the president saying the language of the law simply doesn't mean what it says.
Amy, you can't get an issue that will polarize people much more than this. Yes. The Obama White House and their supporters are saying that this is the extension of a basic civil right, but the skeptics, the opponents, are saying you've got federal overreach, you've got Washington going into the public school and saying this is how your kids are going to have to live. It's a tough one.
Well, what's interesting is when we had the debate earlier, I guess it was this week, when it was over North Carolina, and you saw a lot of Republicans kind of shying away from that fight, not getting as engaged in that battle. In many cases, they didn't want to engage on a cultural war that they felt like was not a winner for them. When Barack Obama got involved in this, then it became as much about Obama and overreach and the debate that we've been having now for the last few years about a president that they feel is just by fiat doing these executive orders. And so what I feel that's happening right now, rather than it being just cultural war dividing red and blue, it's really, once again, the battle against Barack Obama. One thing I will say, though, to folks who are frustrated about the overreach, don't think this is going away when Barack Obama's gone. Okay, when Congress doesn't get anything done, which they haven't in a long time, do you think they're going to handle this issue? Absolutely not. That gives more power to the executive, and the next president's going to do exactly what this president does until the legislature starts getting things done.
We asked you for questions for the panel, and we got a number from people who were opposed to this new White House order. Paul Indra sent this on Facebook. What other social issues are out there for Obama to overstep his authority? He is in year 8, so I imagine this could get bad. Brit, how do you answer, Paul?
I don't disagree, really, and I would say about what Amy just said that, well, I understand the point. This isn't just about Congress not dealing with this issue. This is an issue that came out of nowhere. It's not as if this has been before Congress and Congress has refused to act. In fact, Congress has acted on this, as George pointed out, in 1964, and you have to accept the idea of somebody's claimed gender over biological fact. And as a practical matter, how is this exactly going to work? What happens when a man with male parts decides that he is really a woman and would like to take a shower in the ladies' locker room? And there he is with his male parts exposed. Now, is this really something that people are going to think is really okay in the name of civil rights? I don't think so. I think the absurdity of this is so strong that it's hard for me to imagine that the public wouldn't be repulsed by it.
But it's complex, and Amy's right. It's been politicized, and so you can't really get down to the substance of it. And
well, but
for lots of people,
of it. And
yes.
and when you get the administration, I mean, it's one thing to fight back against North Carolina's law, but when you have the administration directing every public school district in America, this is what's going to go on in the bathroom and in the locker room. There's a substantial issue there.
There is, and to lots of people, it's an important civil rights issue, and a lot of people, advocates of this, say it is the last civil right. But Brit also has a point. Practically, how do you do this, and how do you deal with it? And happily, I think it's something we can be optimistic about. Over the coming months and years, I think this will be worked out.
What the policy ought to be. Don't ask, don't tell, and don't show.
Okay. Well, let me, I do want to switch, because we have promised we're going to talk about another subject, to something that we can all agree on, does involve the government, and that is that the lines at airports are just too darn long and getting longer, sometimes, as you can see here this week, more than an hour to clear checkpoints, and they're going to get even longer this summer. George, the TSA blames Congress for, well, wait a minute, for cutting its staff. They have 4,000 fewer screeners than they had 3 years ago. The airports, some of them are under pressure to hire private screeners, and everybody blames the airlines for making you pay a fee to check your bag, which means that more people take their bags through the security checkpoints.
The TSA, the T stands for Transportation Security. The TSA has found time to have officiated at and done security at 252 campaign rallies this year. Have nothing to do with transportation security. Every federal agency that follows up says it does so because it doesn't have enough money. The IRS says, well, we got into monitoring conservatives and suppressing their speech because we were overwhelmed by new applications and we didn't have enough money, so give us more money. The same thing is now happening with this. First question is, what are they doing at these rallies instead of being at the airports? Happily, again, this is another impetus for privatization. A number of airports around the country are saying, we're going to go to private screeners, contract this out, and that's a net gain.
You know what I would love to see? Instead of airports spending all this time and energy on the new beautiful restaurants and manicure places, re-engineering the way that we do screening. It's not that complicated. So when the person takes their bag that has water in it, or his keys, or he forgets that he put something else in there, that person immediately gets pushed over to the side so other people can go through. It's not hard. Re-engineer the airport.
Do you have a solution, Britt? And I got to imagine that you waiting on a line for an hour would be about as unpleasant as me waiting on a line for an hour.
Well, I went out to an office, I guess it was downtown here, and had a meeting with the TSA people, which is available to anyone. And I got this little TSA pre-check number, which means that I can more quickly go through the line. It would be good if a lot more people did that. Now, that would make that line more crowded.
Yeah, I was going to say, we don't want to tell people about that line.
But it would help.
Yes, and I have it too, and anybody can get it. All you have to do is go to the TSA. Thank you, panel. See you next Sunday.